being able to break through means really taking the time to understand who your audience is, who you're talking to, what niche communities they're a part of, what their affinities are, what they really love to do on their free time, and then aligning yourself with those goals, but not losing your brand in the process.
Hey, Kristin, welcome to the show. How are you?
Happy to be here. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Love it. Today we discuss about what is going on, right, with Gen Z and millennials in terms of how they search things when it comes to travels, and how things are changing. And so I'm very curious, right? It's a topic that I care about. It's travel itself. It's something that I love as a thing. So I'm very curious, to learn more about that today. Before we get started, though, Kristin, we always ask our guests to present themselves, and we do, in a way that is called the map. Basically, it's divided in three main areas, right? So the mission, what do you aim to achieve with your work? Achievements, anything that you are very proud, could be your life, your job, or both. And the last one is the purpose. So in addition to the mission, right, that is what do you aim to achieve? The purpose is why do you do what you do?
Cool. Love it. So I am the head of paid media over at Tripadvisor Groups that oversees paid media, social strategy, affiliate influencers, content partnerships for both Tripadvisor and Viator as brands. And prior to coming to Tripadvisor Group, I was at Wendy's for 8 years. So kind of looking at the collective of my full career, have always been at these kind of challenger brands. And I don't know if it's that I am a little sister and that challenger mentality is kind of ingrained in my DNA, but I love being at a brand who maybe it doesn't have the competitive spend that some of the other big guys have, or the ability to be on those big stages, but it is almost a forcing function for us to consistently be as innovative as possible. So bringing our partners to the table with that, bringing our internal agencies to the table with that. I think just kind of looking at the collective of my career, being where we are today at Tripadvisor, at Viator, and looking at Wendy's, have always been in a space where we've really been able to kind of challenge the status quo and what our expectations have been of our brands within the marketplace, which has been super exciting.
Very nice, amazing. And I don't know, like, if there is anything else that you want to add in terms of either like anything that you worked on lately that you are proud of, something like that for you is a case study, something that you want to share with us.
Yeah, totally. I think knowing here we are talking about creators today, being able to kind of see where the creator economy has evolved from the beginning of the career to now, it just consistently evolves alongside the consumer. So being at Tripadvisor, which is inherently more of a search brand, a search platform, when you think about trip planning, being able to partner with creators to get that immersive content out into the space, into certain social platforms, search platforms, the way that consumers evaluate travel these days and just in general is they want to be able to be immersed in what they're really purchasing. When they go to Rome in the summer, what is a restaurant like? What is the nightlife like? What are people wearing? What are they talking about? And through the way that the creator economy and search together have kind of converged, it gives brands a really nice opportunity to be able to consistently meet the consumer where they are, which we're super excited about at Tripadvisor.
Let's get into that, right? Because I've been myself an SEO expert for many years. I do not understand the importance of SEO, and it's very interesting, right, how it changed in the past years, going from merely like a keyword-based type of search that sometimes was not really giving you what you were looking for, and also the customization, right, that sometimes you need. As you said, maybe you're gonna go to another city. Some will do for the food scene. Some others will do for where should I buy, my clothes? What are those non-touristic experience that I should know about, right? And so these days, we're seeing, especially younger generation, they go on social media and they look for this thing, right? Like, so what to do, for the weekend in New York City and yada, yada. So first of all, like, tell me a bit more how, this type of search is changing and how TripAdvisor is adapting, right? Again, going from this typical keyword base to more experiential and tailored on a need of a traveler or even someone that is in their own city. They want to look for something special to do.
Yeah, well, so at the Tripadvisor Group, we have over 400,000 bookable experiences across Viator and Tripadvisor. So when you think about that, you think about content, it isn't necessarily a tangible good. So when we're talking about how to get that experience and the knowledge of that experience, the awareness of it out into the marketplace, creators in different capacities have been super helpful in order to partner with and to get that to the consumer. So we look at affiliate creators. Right now, we're working very closely with TikTok on an initiative called TikTok Go, where we're able to partner with them through an affiliate network and to get our experiences out into a space where it adds value to the consumer experience. When you think about social in general, media consumption, man, it is super congested for any brand to be able to break through. But then taking that into account, being able to have that kind of thumb stopping power, have the consumer actually engage in it when they're in a mindset of unplugging is
Mhm.
super challenging. So we've leveraged our partnerships with creators from an affiliate perspective to be able to kind of provide that more immersive content on the ground. What is that wine tour like in Napa? Here's how I experienced while you're on TikTok, being able to kind of swipe up, book that experience right within the platform is really meeting the consumer where they are. And then when we think more broadly about creators and more education about our brands, it isn't so much that direct one-to-one search, but all these things in totality come together to be able to show our consumer who we are today. When you think about Tripadvisor, yeah, it advises you on your trips, but did you know that you could book over 400,000 experiences, things to do in cities that you're going to? Maybe not. So how do we get that to the consumer? One, it's through education on some of those more turnkey opportunities like affiliate influencers, but two, it's more of those kind of broader social creator partnerships that really allow the consumer to see one, the value of the product that we bring to the table, but two, who our brand is and what we're about. So looking at kind of how we've partnered across the board, different capacities through each, and not everything is the same when we think about
Mhm.
creators. I think we've come to a really interesting space within the creator marketplace where it isn't so much of send the brief out, do the work, post the post, there it's done. It really is more of a brand collaboration, and creators have turned into brands themselves, which is a totally different way of approaching the market.
And we're gonna go in the all these right all about the collaboration in a second. I would love to hear a bit more about how do you balance. Like on the podcast, we talk many times about how do you balance, brand guidelines and leaving the freedom, right, of the tone of voice and so on. So I would love to get in there. You mentioned TikTok Go, right? I do remember when that was announced, and I do remember that when I was personally looking at Douyin, right, the Chinese TikTok, they for many years already, right? They deployed this way for local businesses to show menu, opening hours, reviews, right? Something that is working very well in China and Indonesia and a few other, Asian countries. While in the US, I noticed that it's taken a bit more, right, for this implementation. Why do you think that is the case? Like, I think that it's very useful, right, for people to have everything in one place. But I noticed that it's taken a bit more in the US. So I'm curious, based on your experience, like what is working and what do you think that maybe the US is missing in terms of geolocation? And then if you, of
Yeah.
course, you have any other information about also like Europe and other like areas, that would be great. But I'm still finding that there are a bit of manual actions of people to do
Mm,
that could be easily integrated. So I'm just curious about your experience so far
yeah.
with that.
No, it's a great push. I think really it probably mostly depends on where the audience is and their behavior.
Hmm.
So if you think about the US audience where we've gotten to with more of those CPG brands being able to access something like a TikTok shop where some of those less so tangible
Sure.
goods are a little bit they're starting to be more in the mindset of the consumer of, oh, I see this person in this space and maybe I can click on it and maybe I can book that
Hmm.
exact same experience that they had booked themselves on Viator. But I don't know if that's something that was as quickly adopted as it was in Asian markets. But now that it's
Hmm.
definitely coming here kind of full throttle into the US market, which is super exciting. I mean, right now we're partnering with TikTok, but there are other brands that are also exploring it that we're looking into. So I think across the board, just being able to you talked a little bit about search and how we've started to evolve that. And before it was all right, so a little bit more of an analog experience. What
Hmm.
would I do in this space? Let me read through all of the details. And now it truly is, let me see what it's like and if I like it and if I'm going to do it myself. And I think that's really how the user has, because we have so much video content that we're consuming every day, our mindset is just completely shifted. We're kind
Hmm.
of in this space as a society where we want to be unplugged. There's cottage core, there's analog core, but we
Hmm.
film it. So we still have
Yeah.
this like appetite for community to be able to see it. You see so much content of people on a rainy day sitting next to a window reading a book, but they filmed the whole thing. And there's something about community there
Yeah.
that seems like it's still that through line. So when we think about creators for travel, it's kind of similar. You're
Hmm.
unplugging when you're traveling, but you still want to share what you've done. And so when we think about a TikTok Go, that's a really good opportunity to say, when I was in this space, I did this experience. I booked it on Viator. Viator is the first experience partner to launch with TikTok Go. So that was a really cool opportunity to be able to see the audience start to move in that direction. And we're still
Hmm.
building, still working through that. But it's been really exciting, I think, to your point on kind of different marketplaces and how they've reacted to different things and when they have that appetite for the product. It does feel like it's starting to really come into the US space
Hmm.
now, whereas to your point, more in Asia previously, where we really saw that kind of skyrocket in that market too.
And still on the searches, right? I'm also very curious to understand how are you currently analyzing things, right? Because when it comes to SEO and keyword based, I don't want to say that it's easy, but it's easier in terms that you can use Search Console, right, from Google Analytics and similar, where you see all the keywords, all the queries, right, that actually brought to the website. You can kind of group them by keywords. You can understand in terms of where are in this sales cycle, right? Are they just looking for something? Are they comparing prices and so on? And that is again a lot of can happen, especially when you have like I'm pretty sure like millions of users and tens of thousands different keywords. But it's somehow again keyword based, text based. When it comes to the new way of searching, right? That sometimes it's audio search, sometimes it's AI. So meaning that I go to ChatGPT, Claude, you name it, and I say, do for me like create a itinerary for me and so on. How are you currently looking at all these and kind of remove the noise and understanding what people are really looking for? Because there is so much happening. So I'm curious how you do that.
No, it's a great point. It's interesting because we've also evolved from a space maybe 5-10 years ago where we looked at platforms like a TikTok, Meta, Google as kind of this tool, this partner in trafficking our message to the consumer. Where now they're more kind of one-to-one with us, where time spent is what we're up against across the board. Everyone wants the most time spent on their platform because high level that feels like, okay, if somebody's spending as much time as possible on a Meta platform, on TikTok, that means they trust our brand and they're probably more likely to convert because we have that trust. So that has been where TripAdvisor and Vider have also been. And I think just brand agnostic, industry agnostic, where a lot of brands have been in the past, is how do we have that kind of share of time across the board and how do we keep the consumer within our platform for as long as possible? So that's one thing, is our competitive landscape has totally shifted. So to your point on the noise, we're all looking for as much time spent with the consumer as possible in order for them to convert. So that's where you see opportunities like TikTok Go come up and other opportunities across the board where it feels more, okay, so how do we keep that time spent here, but also still drive that conversion? I think when we're looking to our partners and we're looking to go to market, our biggest touchstones are really, how do we provide value? How do we meet the consumer where they are in their mindset? And how do you get your team's heads out of the boardroom? How do you think about the travelers who we need to think about most? It really should be 100% of our focus, because if we're trying to solve things for inside of our four walls, we'll start to lose the traveler and you'll kind of feel that latitude between you and them. So I think just, it sounds easy and it sounds more of a soft skill, but to implement that every single day of, okay, well, is what we're doing driving value for the traveler? Is it meeting them where they are in their mindset? Because to that point, search has evolved so much. The way that consumers view whether or not they're going to book something, they want to be immersed. They want to see what that experience is like. They want to see what people are talking about, what they're wearing, how they're going shopping for wherever they're going. It kind of becomes more of a chain reaction after they're able to start to get bought into, oh yeah, I do want to have this water skiing experience in Lake Como, and here's how I can book it. So all of that to say, there's so much noise. And as long as brands can kind of keep to those three touchstones of that value, being able to really understand what we're up against in the marketplace, that's how we really start to break through.
Hey, if your brand is ready to grow, we are here to help. At the Influencer Marketing Factory, we run full-service influencer campaigns that actually move the needle. We handle everything: creator identification, campaign strategy, contract, shipping, logistics, you name it. We have supported brands of every size, from world-recognized Fortune 500 companies to ambitious DTC startups. And with our in-depth ROI tracking, you always know what's working and why. Just visit the influencermarketingfactory.com to learn more and get started. And, you said, even before we were talking about filming right experiences and going to the public and saying like, this was my experience, you can book it here and so on and so on. Big part of that is, storytelling, of course, and also shareability. Do you think that is changing these days, or the basics and the foundations of both storytelling and shareability online are, because, there are trends, right, that come and go, but I'm curious if you're saying, is there anything that is impacting in a great way how people talk about their experience, how they share online? Or do you think that it's staying the same, and then it's more about the second phase that is, okay, I heard about your story and now it's about the conversion part that you were saying before?
Right. Yeah, no, it's so interesting because it is definitely much more difficult to break through nowadays. When I was at Wendy's at the beginning of my career, 8 or so 10 years ago, breaking through with a voice that had a distinct tonality and a distinct character that no one else had done yet was a little bit easier
Yeah.
once we were able to establish that voice, because then people started to know us for who we were. They had an expectation for who our brand was. Wendy truly was and is the creator and the influencer, and how she shows up is one to one, one of one. And now that brands have really started to kind of find more of a tonality, find more of a voice, put their community management at the focal point of how they're showing up, it becomes more difficult to try to differentiate yourself across
Mhm.
the board. So I think as we're looking at now, and that storytelling element is really rooting ourselves in the audience. So last year we did a lot of work on the Tripadvisor side to be able to say who is our audience and who's our
Mhm.
growth audience. So who do we work with today that knows us super well and leverages us for reviews, trip planning tools within our AI trip planner on Tripadvisor, or is able to book experiences in hotels through the site. They know all those things. They know all of that value. Where a younger generation might not know all of that value. They might look at us as, oh yeah, they advise you on your trips, but I could probably find it on TikTok.
Mm.
So we have to kind of start to think through, all right, so what do we know about these audiences? When you think about someone who loves to travel, it's not a monolith. A lot of people like to travel,
Of
but they're
course.
also interested in a lot of other things. I think over the last few years, we saw people booking travel for concerts, experiences. It's really that experience led trip enthusiast that
Mhm.
we're looking at. But then there's also things within the US, within their current environment, that they might be able to book on those platforms. So when we think about it, being able to break through means really taking the time to understand who your audience is, who you're talking to, what niche communities they're a part of, what their affinities are, what they really love to do on their free time, and then aligning yourself with those goals, but not losing your brain in the process. We've done a lot of that work on TripAdvisor within the last year. And last year, we were named one of the top 10 brands resonating with Gen Z, where 2 years prior, we were named one of the top 10 brands resonating with boomers, both super important audiences to us. But to be able to say, man, we've just spanned across multiple generations for one brand and had to kind of redefine ourselves to a younger audience while
Mhm.
still keeping that value with a different audience. That's really how we're able to continue to be rooted within who our brand is, who our audience is. That's how we've been able to break through. And there's more to come. We're definitely in the beginning of our journey with that. But I think building that momentum and seeing those wins for the team has been confidence building and helps us continue to push our brands forward.
So I'm very curious, because you mentioned something important. You said not to lose your brand, right? Because we notice this, right? There are certain brands out there, companies that I say this all the time, to win over a new segment, they change their identity maybe for 1 week to go viral, on TikTok or whatever. And then
Right.
they lose their identity. They confuse their base customers that maybe are the one giving the money, just again to win over and to, wink to a new type of segment that might not be actually there. So how do you again not lose that? And secondly, you said that you were able to, again, travelers can be anyone, right? Young people, older people, someone that goes for a specific thing, and then they, let's say, they go to a place for a concert, and then
Mhm.
because they're going there, they expand and they go for something else. Others instead are saying, I'm gonna go there, and once I'm there, I'm gonna find, on TripAdvisor things that I can do while I'm there. So there is a lot, right? So can you tell me a bit more, like, again, how do you really don't lose, your brand identity, and how can you still segment people, understanding exactly what to give them without confusing someone that is maybe a boomer and someone that is like a teenager with different
Yeah.
type of messaging, and how can you really, convey that to, again, some different type of people out there?
Yeah. Personalization is key. So
Hmm.
partnering with our CRM partners for those audiences, once we kind of know a little bit more about them, how do we continue to dig in deeper and give them more content or relevant opportunities for them to be able to book with us as they travel? I think across all of TripAdvisor and Vider, as we're thinking about how we go to market, we still it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. We still have to be rooted in who our brands are, how we don't lose sight of
Hmm.
those things. A lot of it is patience, which is definitely hard, I think, for any of us marketers, where we're
Hmm.
up against these goals that hit weekly, monthly, quarterly. What did everyone do for me lately kind of vibe? Are the dollars that we're spending in the marketplace, are
Hmm.
they returning to us 100% or more ROAS? So when we're thinking about that, being able to kind of do a little bit of both, have a portfolio of what are some things that we know are meeting the consumer already at that bottom of the funnel experience. So you
Hmm.
mentioned at the top of the conversation a little bit of some more of those price comparison platforms. How are we leveraging those? How is that fitting within our media mix? And then as we look to creators, how are they helping us with our storytelling? How are we aligning not just travel creators? Yes, we absolutely love the travel creator, but how do we align with other creators across the board who want to also experience things that might be in the city that they live in, but it also might be in cities that they're traveling to? And so how do we help enable that? So I think it's, again, like such a soft skill, but being able to really remain rooted and remind yourself and your team every single day of like, well, what are we really here to do for the consumer? Yes, there's a ton of noise surrounding all of us of what does that return on investment look like? Where is our spend? How are we making sure that we're actually hitting those goals for the year that Wall Street has for us? Yes, super important. But then how are we then alongside that building that relationship with those consumers? And that a lot of that is the creative work and the partners that we have both internally and agency side who help us keep that consumer in mind of, all right, so the older generation might be here, whereas millennials, Gen X, Gen Z. Gen Z is still viewed as like such a young generation, but they make up more than 30% of the workforce.
Yeah.
And Gen Alpha is hot on the heels of being able to have buying power in this industry. So how do we not lose sight of that as well? And travelers truly could be of any age. A lot of people travel and a lot of people want to try experiences in cities that they're in. So how do we continue to meet them there? It's really just not losing sight of those core values in our core brand as we continue to push stuff forward, because when brands start to lose who they are in search of clout or in search of a short fleeting moment, those short fleeting moments they've never been shorter. And they live in niche communities across platforms that you might see them and you might not. And that might be a win for a brand in a day, but it also might have been a win for a minute. And then the next one you're up against it. So it's very getting caught in that need for virality. I mean, coming from Wendy's, man, I felt that. And being able to not lose sight of who your brand is throughout it, that's the only way you're able to kind of continue to survive.
And because of that, right? So trying to fight back this constant, being on the treadmill of the next trend, the next virality, right? I've been talking with other, brands, both here on the podcast and also like, privately, but they're telling me how they are trying to move away from these, one-off collaboration that are very transactional to more of, back like back in the day, what were the ambassadors, right? That you work with them for at least 1 year. You do have a plan. There is not just a one-off activation. It goes throughout, the year, maybe with some seasonality here and there, of course, depending on the locations and so on. But I wanted to ask you, are you going towards also that type of, direction where you try to identify those that are extremely like a good fit with your brand, and do you prefer to continue working with them, or are you still on more on the one-off? Is it a mix? I'm hearing a lot of different things these days.
It's absolutely a mix. I would say right now where last year we kind of fostered these relationships with a few different creators. So Taryn and Tiffany is a duo that we have absolutely love to work with. They went to Paris. They've done some events or activations for us within New York. Chris and Nala. So Chris and his dog Nala, they travel a ton and we've partnered with them multiple times. But I think the benefit of having kind of that ambassador community within the mix of your creator strategy is that those creators as a brand get to know your brand and you get to know theirs. So it becomes even easier as you move things forward. And that's also for even bigger kind of higher talent relationships. We worked with Demi Lovato multiple times last year on the Tripadvisor side, and being able to have those kind of longer term relationships just allows you to go to market together in a much more seamless way. So that's definitely part of our mix. But then again, we've been partnering with TikTok on their CCAS program. So creator content at scale. Familiar with that. So that's one too, where it's how do we make sure that whatever is in our brief really shares a little bit about our brand, not just, hey, we have this experience, go do it and post it. That's not it. Like it has to be a little bit more of the introspective work of who's our brand. Are you interested in aligning with us as a brand yourself? And then how would you want to take that to market? And we also want to make sure we want to align with you as well. So it's interesting because I think where we had been 5 or 10 years ago, God, even probably 2 at this point, was a much different space in how we brief creators and have those relationships going forward. And I think now, whether it's affiliate, whether it's micro, macro, ambassador relationship, we try to approach them as similarly as possible across the board. So everyone's getting a pretty similar experience when they get to know both Vider and Tripadvisor. And I think it's important to have a portfolio of how you go to market with creators. If your brand can do that, I think that's super important. That way you're not losing sight of some of those more long-term relationships, but then also having the flexibility to have some short-term relationships as well.
No, yeah, absolutely understand. Especially when it comes to scale, right? The idea is, theoretically speaking, it's fantastic. You can have hundreds of assets, hundreds of people talking about you, but then how do you actually check on brand safety? Can that, right, do they align? So that's also what I noticed, right? The idea that you go on a platform and listen, nothing against that, right? Because it helps to do things at scale. But I noticed that if you don't really check, it's that easy that you lose control over the message, the narrative, keywords that you want to use, not to use. And then it can be that easy, right? I saw that happening at the beginning of affiliate marketing back in the day, where you were like, oh, I can have 1,000 people talking about my brand. Yes, but how are they talking about it?
Right.
Can you control, right, the narrative and your brand, and that could bring it to a big success, or the people that are promoting that are actually gonna ruin, like your brand
Yeah.
identity, your product and
Yeah.
everything. So, that's why I also was interested in understanding a bit more of that.
Yeah, I think the brand safety side of it is interesting because people always joke about like Timothy Chalamet's digital footprint, and God knows he's added to it in recent weeks. But I think those are things that everyone now kind of has this like DNA that lives on the internet of what you've talked about in
Yeah.
podcasts, in social, how things have come to life. And so when we think about our brand going to market, yeah, you lose a lot of control, but I think that's the point. You don't want to be controlling someone else's brand. When you're working with a creator, they're their own brand. So who are we to tell them how to show up? It is more, here's what our brand's about. Here's how we show up as a personality. Here's what the audiences that are important to us. And then through collaboration, it becomes, here are the experiences that we can provide for you. Go ahead, try them out. Let your audience know what you think of them. I think brands have to be a little bit more open to losing a bit of that control, because the more you control it, the
Yeah.
more behind you're going to get. And that's just the
Mhm.
reality of where we are today. It's definitely not anyone's ideal scenario to work with a creator and then down the line something big happens. But that's why you partner super closely with your PR team.
Very important these days.
Yeah.
Last question for you today, Christian. Just, I want to know what are some of the other opportunities for brand marketers? Either something that it's already up there, and you suggest to double down, or opportunities that might be hidden gem that people are like kind of overlooking these days, but if they do it properly, they can win 2026.
Oh, that's a good question. I think being able to, it's the hardest one, but it's really being able to find your differentiation, whether in the marketplace that you're in or just agnostic of your marketplace that you're in. It is so hard to be one of one in social today because you're up against, again, platforms, how they're showing up, creators, how they're showing up, just the day to day person and how they're showing up with their experience and sharing it with the community. But being able to say, I know that the consumers need, we talked a bit about it at the top of the pod, but like being able to say that the consumers need to be unplugged but plugged in at the same time is consistent. It's not going away. They want that community, and how your brand shows up within it, being able to do that introspective work to see who your brand is, what the value is that they bring to the table, not just monetary value, because that's boring. And
Of course.
candidly, consumers, when they're unplugging and they're consuming media, the last thing they want to do is have to give more of themselves and invest more of themselves, one, financially, but two, just their time.
Mhm.
So it is our job as marketers to be able to intercept some of the thinking and be able to entertain and to provide value in those moments. So again, it's a lot of the work that takes time. So be able to have that in parallel path with that portfolio of some more of those bottom funnel drivers for your brand really affords you the opportunity to be able to differentiate yourself within the marketplace and also add value for that consumer that might not have considered you, maybe knows who you are, but has a totally different perception of your brand than you do yourself. We all spend so much time inside the four walls of the company that we work for,
Yeah.
but it becomes so assumed that everyone thinks of us the way that we think of ourselves. And now
Mhm.
we're 20 steps ahead of the consumer. And they're like, I don't even know what you're trying to tell me because that is not important to me. So I think that goes for every brand outside of travel too, that it's very easy to start to slip into those traps, that the more you can avoid them and the more you can stay close to the consumer, whoever you're serving, the better off you'll be as a brand.
Couldn't agree more, Christian. This was great advice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Love it.
This was the Influence Factor by the Influencer Marketing Factory, and I'll see you in the next episode.